the well and ladder of Jacob. In Kabbalah, as we've said before, there are 3 types of souls, primarily. We've said that these 3 souls are Nephesh, Ruach, and Neshama. The lower of these is Nephesh, which we can call the animal soul. Nephesh is related to our appetites and our instinctive impulses. It's a type of animal consciousness. In a literal sense, Nephesh means something related to life or life force, vitality, blood, breath of life, soul, or appetite. So Nephesh relates to these lower instinctual aspects of our consciousness, of our impulses. Ruach is called the thinking emotional soul. This is a soul that has a type of discernment that can rationalize. And the real purpose of Ruach is to develop and to understand ethics, to be able to perceive more or less what is right and wrong. The problem with Ruach is we can use it in a very subjective way. We can rationalize our desires. We often feel Nephesh very strong within us. Nephesh doesn't think about anything. Nephesh is already doing. So while Ruach is thinking whether or not some impulse is right or wrong, Nephesh is already doing it. But Ruach, similarly to Nephesh, can be translated literally as spirit, wind, or breath. So beyond the thinking emotional soul is the spiritual soul, Neshamah. And this is a spiritual perception, objective perception. This is our inner light, and that which perceives God. And it can be translated literally as breath. So as we've said before, the breath and wind can be seen in all 3 of these types of souls. Today, we're going to relate this lecture mostly to Nephesh, the animal soul, and what we must do, because it's not simply that we need to transcend the animal soul, it's that we have to learn how to transform it. Because within Nephesh is an immense power. And if we give up that power, we actually don't have what is necessary to do the work. That's where the power is. The problem is, of course, all of our powerful instincts are unconscious, subjective, animalistic. So in order to clarify this, in order to understand this, we're going to talk some more about the Samaritan woman speaking with Jesus at the well. This is in John 4, verse 5, which reads, "So he, Jesus, came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour." Samaria comes from the Hebrew word shamar, which means, amongst other things, preservation. And within that land of Samaria was the city called Sychar, which comes from the Hebrew shikar, intoxicating drink or recompense. And in this place that means intoxicating drink or recompense, there's a plot of ground near of that of Jacob. So he sat at this well of Jacob, and it was about the 6th hour. So let us understand more about Jacob, because he is such an important figure of the Old Testament. Jacob, of course, has a lot that can be studied, and all of it has a lot of importance. So we are not going to go into every detail. But there are some details here that's going to help us understand what is this well of Jacob. Now we should know, if you're not familiar, Jacob is the one who is renamed Israel. And Israel then has many children with 4 different wives. Now people think that these 4 wives is a example of polygamy. But as we've stated in our prior lectures, we cannot interpret the Bible literally. Just like if we were looking at the old myths, the ancient myths of Greece and Rome, and all of the old cultures that has many different dramas, different types of marriages and children. All of these things have to be understood symbolically. All of the gods and goddesses and heroes and titans, they all represent certain archetypes, features, qualities, attributes. And when they get married to other goddesses, virgins, heroines, all of this represents certain aspects that need to come together, certain features, certain archetypes. And begetting children, again, has a relationship to all of this. So these 12 aspects that come from Israel are, we can say, 12 primary features or archetypes that need to be developed. And Jacob, of course, is a principal element here related to our human soul. Where is our human soul? Because we just talked about 3 souls of Kabbalah: Neshama, Ruach, and Nephesh. And we said that Neshamah is the spiritual soul. The human soul is somewhere within Ruach and Nephesh. We have to extract all of that out so that we have a very pure soul that can blend itself with the spiritual soul. The human soul is related to the 6th hour. It's related to the 6th letter of Vav, because it is the human soul that has this ability to do what is right and wrong, to accomplish the great work, to merge the will of man, which is the human soul, with the will of God, which is related to the spiritual soul and above. And you can see, if you read about Jacob's life, there's a lot of things going on, because there are a lot of things that need to go on within ourself. Straight from the beginning, he has a brother, Esau, and they fight. And that is a relationship between the more animalistic aspects of ourselves and the more elevated spiritual aspects of ourselves. And all of the antagonism that goes on between Jacob and Esau is that antagonism that's going on, that battle that's going on within ourself. So in relationship to Jacob's well, we should understand Jacob's ladder. Jacob's ladder is from the Old Testament, from Genesis. Now, Jacob's ladder illustrates something very important about the path. And when Jacob was traveling, he went out from a place called Beersheba. Now, Beersheba means literally place of 7 wells. And he went toward Haran, which again literally means crossroads. So going out from the place of 7 wells, these 7 wells, of course, are related to 7 pools of water, 7 aspects. Those 7 aspects, we can say, would be related to certain centers within ourselves. the motor center, which is the principal area of movement, the instinctual center, the sexual center, the emotional center, the intellectual center. That is 5, plus 2 more. A superior emotional center and a superior intellectual center. These 2 superior aspects can only be activated and realized when we are in contact with our higher aspects, when we are in contact with the spiritual soul, with our inner God. So he went out from this place of 7 wells and towards the crossroads. And there he lighted upon a certain place and stayed there all night. Now he stayed there all night because the sun was set. It was dark. So when he's coming out from the place of 7 wells, he's going towards the crossroads, and before he gets there, it gets dark. Now this darkness, of course, is something, again, within ourselves. When darkness is within our heart and mind, within our soul. So he takes up camp, in other words, in a certain place. Now what is this place? Well, if we read the Zohar, we can see exactly what this place is. Their commentary is quite clear. In Zohar, on the commentary on Bereshit, which is Genesis, it says, Jacob was secretly referring to the place of the Brit. The place of the Brit is the place of the circumcision. Berit being the covenant, and the circumcision being the symbol of the covenant. So when it said he lied down in that place, some rabbim teach that vi yishkav can be read vi yishkaf bet, the place of the Brit. So when he laid down in this place, in the place of the Brit, means he laid down in relationship to the place where circumcision occurs, which we know is the sexual organs. In relationship to Kabbalah, this is the Sephiroth Yesod. Yesod is the Sephiroth related to our sexual instinct, our sexuality, our sexual power, sexual energy. Yesod has the word Yod in it, and Yod is one of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Yod is also a symbol of the sexual organ, the Yod. And Yesod can be understood as the secret of the Yod. So here Jacob is laying down in relationship to Yesod. He's coming out of the place of the 7 wells and he's setting up camp where the sun had set. Now, when the sun sets, where does it set into? And we know in modern terms that the sun doesn't really set, but the earth rotates. But in terms of the symbolism, the sun is setting into the earth. The light is going down into the earth. And what is the earth? The earth has to be understood as our own physicality. If we were to think of our whole being as the whole universe, then earth would be our physical body. So when the light descends into the earth, darkness is all over the earth. And that light is going down into us. So Jacob sets up camp in this place, which is Yesod, which is the sexual organs. And he tarried there all night because the sun was set. So when it says that he tarried there all night, we can say that he placed himself in meditation, contemplated the darkness, because the sun was set, because the light had descended. And he took the stones of that place and put them for his pillows. So here's something very interesting, because the stones of that place are the stones of Yesod. The stones of Yesod are related to our gonads. The stones is another symbol of the testicles or ovaries. But he put them as his pillows, indicates that he was taking those stones and placing them near his head. What we have to understand here is that he was moving the energy related to Yesod, the sexual energy, and bringing them up into his head so that he could rest his consciousness on that energy which now is up in his head. This is how he took the stones of that place and put them for his pillows. He moved the energy from below to above. So we can see here, this energy which is below is related to Nephesh. Nephesh is the animal soul. Nephesh is related to our appetites and to our instincts. And it is related to the most visceral aspects of our sexual impulse. When we feel that sexual appetite becoming strong within ourselves, this is Nephesh. Nephesh is sitting there in our blood. The impulses of Nephesh are very powerful. It's very difficult to work with. This is why we have to meditate. We have to learn how to transmute that energy, moving it from the lower areas, which is our sexual energy, and learning how to refine that and moving it up. So lo and behold, when he took those stones of that place and put them for his pillows, he laid down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. So here we are again talking about the earth and heaven. This ladder is this place between the lower aspects of our physicality and the upper aspects. So what connects our lower aspects to our upper aspects? The spine, the spinal medulla, which we can see is, in a way, a type of ladder from below to above, set up upon the earth. The earth is below. Below there, of course, is those same gonads where the ladder begins, and the top of it reached to heaven, which is related to the superior aspects above the spinal column, certain glands, like the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, which in the awakened individual facilitate superior types of intuition, experience, vision. And behold the angels of Elohim ascending and descending upon it. If we look at the nervous system, we can see that the main conduit, the main channel of which energy and information flow is the spinal column. Energy is coming, or signals, information is ascending and descending. And the signals are like messengers. The word angel means messenger. And of course, we know that when we do what is right, we work on this path, then we set up our nervous system to be able to receive the superior signals coming from our inner being, those impulses that guide us. We have to do our part. We have to set up the throne, just like a chair. If the chair is set up correctly, then God can sit upon it. But for us to set up that throne correctly, we have to behave. We have to know how to work with our energy, because Nephesh is there. The animal soul is looking, he wants to take that energy and fornicate with it, to spill it. The throne of God is our spinal column. When it has the type of movement of energy that facilitates the reception of the superior principles within ourselves. But we have to do our part. In order to do our part, we have to fight. We have to fight against our animal impulses. So here we have the story of Jacob. When he has to travel, when he comes upon darkness, he knows how to make use of that energy correctly. He knows how to move the energy from below to above. After he rises in the morning, he took the stone that he had put for his pillows and set it up for a pillar. And he poured oil upon the top of that pillar, that stone. And he called the name of that place Bethel. But the name of that city was called Luz at the first. And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And all of that thou shalt give me, I shall surely give the 10th unto thee. This is Genesis 28. So after this profound dream of the ladder, he takes this stone and makes it a pillar, which is again the same type of symbol of an erected stone. If you think of a long stone placed vertically, it's another symbol of a pillar, of a column. Just like we've said in earlier lectures about candelabra that needs to pass oil from the bottom to the top. And the same symbol. This time, Jacob is symbolizing this as a stone. And he pours oil on top of this stone. This word pour, this word poured is yatzak, which means to cast in metal. And the word oil, as we have said before, are the 3 letters Shin, Mem, Nun, which is the word Shimen, which is related to semen. Semen is the oil, but in this case, it's the transmuted oil. Just like as we have said in the earlier lectures, this is the oil that we need to produce. So with this oil, he casts into metal. What this means, this is actually an alchemical statement, that from this oil, we learn how to cast superior types of vessels, superior raiments or clothings. This is how we are forming within ourselves what's called the wedding garment. And the wedding garment is something that we need in order to be received in heaven. We need to work with the oil. Now, this place he calls Bethel means house of God. Bet is house and El is God. But before it was named house of God, it was named Luz, L-U-Z. Now, L-U-Z means almond tree. This almond tree, this is the same symbol of the gonads, just like the olives were. So the house of God begins with our sexual organs and our sexual instinct, but refined. And this place becomes a pillar. This pillar is like an altar. So when we approach the altar, the stone, this stone is related to that sexual power, but erected correctly. And as it is stated in the New Testament by Jesus, the stone which the builders had rejected shall become the head of the corner. This is the same stone related here, because that stone is sex. And many people, most people who wish to become spiritual or interested in spirituality, don't want to touch their sexual behaviors. So they reject the very stone that they need in order to build their inner temple. And finally, later in Jacob's life, he has another very important related story related to this lecture. And this is when Jacob wrestles with God. And this is in Genesis 32. And there he was wrestling with a man. But in other places it says that Jacob was wrestling an angel. And in the Zohar, it says that he was wrestling with the angel of strength, Samael. So Samael is a name of God. So the word El there is at the end, which is God. And Sam at the beginning can mean bitterness, bitter beverage, poison, medicine, bitter beverage. So this bitterness related to God is what Jacob had to wrestle. And he's wrestling with him until the break of the day. And here we have the opposite symbol. Before, the sun was setting into earth. And here, the sun is about to rise out of the earth. So when the sun is rising out of the earth, this is the symbol of a birth of new consciousness, a birth of new light, a new day. And when the angel saw that he had prevailed against him, this angel touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint. So here the angel was maybe surprised that he was being thwarted by Jacob. Jacob was a very strong person. And he was wondering, how is it possible I can't wrestle this person to the ground? So he checked the hollow of Jacob's thigh. Now this is a symbol of the sex. They say that this was the thigh joint. But every time that the Bible talks about the thigh bone, this is related to sex. Pythagoras, for example, was noted to have a golden thigh bone. This is, again, related to making gold out of one's sexual energy. But here, the angel is checking the thigh bone, in other words, investigating the nature of Jacob's sexual behavior, his chastity. And he saw that Jacob's thigh was out of joint. In this case, it means Jacob's thigh was not in alignment with the desires. That's the reason why the angel could not bring him down. And the angel says, "Let me go, for the dawn is ascending." Because this type of energy, even though it's of God, is extremely powerful. You have to wrestle with it. When you wrestle with it, you learn. Is your thigh bone truly in alignment with the light, or is it in alignment with desire? Because if it is in alignment with desire, that angel is going to wrestle you to the ground, and you're going to fall into temptation. You're not going to be able to transmute the energy. You're not going to be able to bring Jacob's ladder within yourself. But if you persist and you do have true comprehension of your desires, and you know how to work with that power to enlighten yourself, then that angel gives you that comprehension. And the dawn rises upon you, and a new day is there. And this is where this angel names Jacob Israel. And this is where Jacob calls this place Peniel, which means face of God. And he called it Peniel because he had seen Elohim face to face. And then he says, For I have seen Elohim face to face, and my life is preserved. Here, this phrase, my life is preserved, needs to be understood. Because the word life is actually the word Nephesh. We had talked about Nephesh in the beginning of the lecture, because Nephesh is the animal soul. But here it's saying my life is preserved. Preserved is netzal, which can also mean rescued. My life is rescued. So what do we mean by this? Because Nephesh is the animal soul. Nephesh is the animal instinct. What has been said here is that he did not lose his Nephesh. He has rescued it. What does he have rescued it from? This is a way of understanding that one has to preserve their life force, which is Nephesh. They have to rescue their life force, because right now, the life force is always being wasted. We're always wasting our life force with instinctual desires. We're not preserving it, we're not rescuing it. We're usually expelling it, wasting it. fornicating it. But here with the battle, with the wrestling, with this, if we know how to work correctly, we know how to take that energy and place it towards the will of God. And it will enlighten us. So this is how the Nephesh is preserved. But when this Nephesh is preserved, the animality becomes less and less. And what remains is just the power. But this power is enlightened. This power becomes the power that we have as being a child of God. This Nephesh, we can say, is the fire. This is our gift. If we didn't have this fire within ourselves, we wouldn't be able to do the work. But unfortunately, fire can burn ourselves. And this is what we end up doing. We don't know how to use the fire, so we end up in pain, suffering. But here, Jacob is showing us that we have to preserve our Nephesh in a special way. This isn't repression. This isn't ignoring our sexual instinct, but rather working with it, wrestling with it in a certain way, comprehending, renouncing animal desire, replacing animal desire with true love, comprehension, even into our instincts. That instinct, that instinctual power, which is this fire in our belly, this fire in our loins, this fire then rises up Jacob's ladder and it enlightens us. And we see the powers of our innermost, the powers of our inner God. So all of this is outlined in the story of Jacob, and much, much more, of course. Let us return all the way back to the New Testament again, and we see, reading again about the Samaritan woman, that Jesus comes to the city of Samaria, which means preservation. And this place in Samaria is called Sychar, which means intoxicating drink. This intoxicating drink, we can say, is a type of spiritual intoxication that happens when we know how to preserve our Nephesh in the right way. And where is it near? It is near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph, and therefore it was called Jacob's well. This is where Jesus was. And thus sat Jesus by the well and talked to the Samaritan woman at the 6th hour. Interestingly enough, Jacob's father, Isaac, was 60 years old when he had Jacob. And here we have Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman at the 6th hour. The number 6 is related to Vav. Vav, as we've said before, is like a vertical column. And the vertical column is represented by our spinal column. So Jacob is a story related to Vav, the whole thing. This vertical ascension and development of the archetypes. So Vav is the work that we must do, where we are continuously challenged to do the right thing. When we make the right decisions, then we do well. We progress on the path. We ascend. And when we do the wrong things, we descend. And that all happens, we can say, in relationship to Vav. So if we remember, Vav is formed by a yod that has been elongated vertically. Vav is the word literally for and. So Vav is the connector between ideas. It is a bridge between ideas in language. And symbolically, Vav is the conduit between man and God, between heaven and earth. Vav is the vertical staff of the wise, the spinal column, the reed, the measure of wisdom within ourselves, and is completely related with the ladder of Jacob. But now we're talking about the well of Jacob. John 4:7 reads, "A woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink,' for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman from Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband, and come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." And Jesus says, "Of course, I know this. You've had more than one husband." So what this is all relating to, of course, is that same Nephesh. In order to draw the water out, we need to have control over our Nephesh, our animal instincts, our sexual instincts. And Jesus is testing the woman. Go call your husband. And because she does not have a husband, this indicates that she's not working with the sexual energy. Now, where is the well of Jacob? Well, we can say that the well of Jacob is the same place that the ladder of Jacob begins, which is down in the earth, because we know that the ladder of Jacob begins in the earth. But even in this case, we can say that the ladder of Jacob begins not just at earth, but inside, which again, in us, is related to our sexuality, our sexual organs, yesod. Now, yesod is the 9th out of 10 Sephiroth. So we can place the 10 Sephiroth of Kabbalah, we can superimpose it over the physical body and the regions of the physical body. At the very bottom is Malkut, which we can relate with our feet. And one Sephiroth above that is Yesod. And Yesod is related to our sexual organs, as we've said. Yesod is the 9th Sephiroth. And the 9th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is called Teth. Now, Teth looks almost like the letter in English, the letter U, but with more features. It's two vertical areas on the left and right that's connected horizontally at the bottom. Now, Kabbalistically, in terms of the letters, all the letters can be composed by other letters. So Teth is formed on the right hand, the right vertical, by a Vav, and on the left vertical by a Zayin. And at the bottom, they are horizontally connected. At the top, you can see the Zayin, and you can see the Vav, but they don't touch at the top. Now, Teth is the symbol of the serpent. It even looks like a serpent sort of coiled and with its head raised up. So one side is the end of the serpent, and the other side is the head of the serpent. So on the right, as we've said before, Vav is related to the spinal column, but more specifically, when we talk about Vav and Zayin, we have a duality within our spinal column. We have the right and the left sides. And the right is related to Vav, the masculine aspect, the masculine energy. In the book of Genesis is related to Adam. And the Zayin is the feminine energy, Eve on the left. So Teth is the 9th letter, related to the 9th Sephiroth, Yesod, and Yesod represents sexuality. We can see here in Teth the serpent, Adam, and Eve. Teth is the tempting serpent of paradise. And we know that that serpent says that if he tells Eve the way to know good and evil, it's by biting the apple, the forbidden fruit. But here Eve does not resist the temptations of her Nephesh, we can say. So the result of that, of course, was not an ascension of consciousness, but a descension of consciousness in that symbol. And the energy of our spinal column goes into darkness and is kicked out of Eden. Eden is a word that means bliss, to be full of the bliss of God, But when we succumb to our instincts, to fornication, to orgasm, we're pushing all of the energy out. And that energetic throne of God no longer exists within ourselves. So God can't seat itself within ourselves. So God leaves, and we're left with just darkness. So Teth is the tempting serpent of paradise. Teth is the crucible of spiritual knowledge. Within that wrestling, within that strong energy of Teth, of the strong angel, the fire, we need to learn how to work with that. And this is related to the 9th hour, the 9th letter, Yesod. Jesus says, if you only knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked to him and he would have given you a living water. So let us talk a little bit more again about the gift of God, because this is very important to understand. Normally, the gift of God is interpreted as a very simple, easy way to achieve salvation. But we must understand this more esoterically. The gift of God is what allows us to do the work. If we did not have the gift of God, we couldn't do the work. We couldn't enlighten ourselves. We couldn't erect the pillar within ourselves. We couldn't pour oil onto that pillar of Jacob to mold new metallic forces within ourselves, to speak alchemically. The metallic forces within ourselves, and this is a symbol we're talking about here, the metallic forces within ourselves is what attracts. Just like different metals have different energetic, electronic, and magnetic qualities. These metals within ourselves that can attract the forces of the universe, the forces of God. If we don't have the gift of God, we can't develop anything within ourselves. What is the gift of God? Gift of God is the same fire that Prometheus gives to man. But in that symbol, the fire is viewed a little bit differently. The punishment and how things go are a little bit different. But you see in the Old Testament, Adam and Eve are tempted and they fail. Because the fires within themselves, they didn't know how to handle them. But it's that same fire, that same strength, that same power, which is Nephesh, is what Jacob is able to wrestle with and achieve enlightenment, to ascend his consciousness up the ladder. But if we don't have the fire, we can never make light. We need the fire. So although this fire is a bitterness sometimes, it's a power. And this fire we have to wrestle with. We have to know how to become, how to control it. But of course, we need to understand that sometimes this fire is also symbolized as a water, as an ocean, or as a well, as a pool. Because this fire, we can say, is a liquid fire, a fluidic, igneous force, which is both like an igneous water or a liquid fire within ourselves. And our sexual impulse. So the gift of God here is Dorian Tau Theo. Later in the New Testament, Paul talks about the gift of God, Theos Doron. So whether we call it Theos Doron or Doron Tau Theo, it's the same gift of God, or God's gift. So as Paul states, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that is not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works. People think this just means you have to just believe in God, and because of that you'll be saved. But here we have to know that faith does not mean simple blind belief, as we've said already in several prior lectures. And it's not simply doing good things to others. It's not simply of doing works to help others. That's very, we can say, necessary in another way. But if you do all the good works in the world, or if you're completely charitable, but you do not work with the gift of God, it won't matter. First things first, you have to work with the gift of God, the Donum Dei, the Theos Doron. In Hebrew, that is Mattia. And as we've said, but we're going to keep repeating, Judas gets replaced by Matthias. Judas is related once again with the sexual organs. Sexuality, which, when not used correctly, is a principal cause of the crucifixion of the Lord. But when we do the work correctly, Judas, which is a brute instinctual desire, which is always going against the will of God, gets converted into its natural element, which is the gift of God, Matthias. We have to work with that fire. That fire then goes up the ladder of Jacob, becomes the Pentecostal fire. It becomes that light of the menorah. It becomes that light of the halo. It's the same gift of God. It's the same fire. It's the same, we can say, Nephesh, but refined. So let us not ignore Nephesh or hate Nephesh. We have to learn how to wrestle with it, to comprehend it. And how is it that we know how to wrestle with it? What do we do? Well, this is called meditation. Because if just simply saying, I don't want to be a fornicator, I don't want to have lust, this is not going to work. It doesn't work that way. You have to learn how to meditate. And in relationship to ascending that energy, we need to learn how to breathe. We need to know what in yoga is called pranayama. And the same type of science is taught in esoteric Christianity. So let us remember, at the beginning of the lecture, we talked about the 3 souls of Kabbalah. All 3 of those can be related to the word breath. Breath or wind is like a movement of energy that's almost invisible, but moves things. And you can see that we are moved by different forces. This is one way we can understand that breath or wind within ourselves. But even physically, biologically, our literal breathing can help move energy within ourselves in a way which is going to help us transmute, to bring that energy from below up to our brain, up to our pineal gland, to the superior forces, to set up that throne of God within ourselves. So in the well of Jacob are the waters. We need to know how to make a pillar out of these waters. This is a certain passage in Exodus that talks about, or is a song that is sung about the triumphs related to Exodus. The common interpretation or translation of this verse is Exodus 15:8, and with the blast of your nostrils the waters were gathered together. The floods stood upright as an heap, and the depths were congealed in the heart of the sea. But we need to understand this esoterically, because there is the word Ruach already. And Ruach, we know, related to a wind, a breath. And by the Ruach of your noses, your sexual waters were gathered together. Your flowing waters were lifted up like a pillar. And the depths within the well of Jacob, within Yesod, coagulated in the heart, in the sea of your heart. So here is an understanding of breathing, learning how to breathe correctly. We all know that when the nervous system is agitated, our breath changes. But we should also understand that if we regulate our breath, this has the same effect backwards into the flow of our energy. So breathing is a way of controlling the nervous system. When we consciously breathe, or are conscious of our breath, it naturally begins to regulate the energy within our body in accordance with our consciousness. This is very good, very beneficial. Especially if we're single and we cannot partake in a spiritual marriage. If we're a single person, we need to learn how to transmute our sexual energy. And we do this with deep breathing. Samael and Vior states, single people must transmute the seminal liquor with deep breathing, keeping the lungs full 30 seconds or more. So if someone's trying to awaken their consciousness and they're working with chastity, obviously the energy of Nephesh, our sexual energy, begins to pool up, and our nervous system becomes very sensitive to the impressions, all sorts of impressions that may excite the sexual center. This indicates that we need to work very diligently with transmuting that energy, because the energy is going to pool up. We continuously receive the dawnum day, the fire of God within ourselves. We have to do the work to lift it up. And if we're a single person, we need to transmute that with breathing exercises, amongst other things. But breathing is very important for transmutation and in relationship to our meditation. Because good meditation, going into our consciousness, into our mind, we need a calm nervous system. And everything is sort of built upon each other. If your physical body is agitated and your nervous system is agitated, it's going to be difficult to go into meditation. So these types of breathing exercises are well documented in the Philokalia. Saint Gregory Palamas, in his work titled In Defense of Those Who Devoutly Practice a Life of Stillness, writes, since the intellect of those recently embarked on a spiritual path continually darts away again as soon as it has been concentrated, they must continually bring it back once more. Some teachers recommend them to pay attention to the exhalation and inhalation of their breath, and to restrain it a little, so that while they are watching it, the mind too may be held in check. So this is a common technique that's known by many people today. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people who consider themselves Christian, they don't like the idea of meditation. They think it's something related not to Christianity. But in truth it is. It's the same type of practice. They have different names for things. But watching the breath is a very excellent practice that will help regulate your energy and prepare you for meditation. By placing your concentration, by placing your perception on the way you're breathing, this helps bring and collect your attention in one place, so that you little by little become less scattered and become more and more concentrated. So the restraining of your breath is a subtle way of pulling the breath through your nostrils into your lungs, but not too much of a force. But normally when we breathe in, we open up the back of our throat very well so that we breathe very easily. But if you don't open up the back of your throat too much, you have a type of way of breathing with a little bit of restraint. So you're actually sort of pulling breath in. This also works as a way of calming the mind. Also in the Philokalia, Saint Simon, the new theologian, in his work, The Three Methods of Prayer, states, restrain the drawing in of breath through your nostrils, so as not to breathe easily. And search inside yourself with your nous, so as to find the place of the heart, where all the powers of the soul reside. Finally, Nicephorus, the monk, on watchfulness and the guarding of the heart, writes, seat yourself, then concentrate your nous, and lead it into the respiratory passage through which your breath passes into your heart. Put pressure on your nous and compel it to descend with your inhaled breath into your heart. Once it has entered there, what follows will be neither dismal nor glum. Just as a man, after being far away from home, on his return, is overjoyed at being with his wife and children again. So the nous, once it is united with the soul, is filled with indescribable delight. Nous is related to our intelligence. Often these works are translated into English. They translate nous as intellect, but this is a poor translation, because nous is, in terms of spirituality, not related to our intellect and our reasoning. Nous is related to our higher aspects. Nous is our remembrance of God, our spiritual light. And we have to place that inside of our heart. Many people are too intellectual, and they try to be cerebral when they meditate. What we really need is an open heart. It is the fires of our heart that control the fires of our sex. To solve the great struggle of our life, we need to learn how to love. This may sound oversimplistic or cliche, but it is the truth. But this is a love that is birthed within us when we know how to work with the Donum Dei, with the gift of God. So in order to erect the pillar within ourselves, the pillar of water or the pillar of stone, whatever you want to call it, this pillar of energy within ourselves, we have to live a life of rectitude and love. And in our life, we need to begin to meditate. And one of these principal methods is to learn how to watch our breath. So first, Samael Aun Weor states that one way of transmuting our energy is to take very large in-breaths and hold it, and then exhale. And while we're doing this, we can imagine breathing in almost like a pump, pulling energy from our sexual center up. And then as we exhale, letting that energy settle into our heart. And we can do that for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And thereafter, we can then watch our breath. Just watch it. Ignoring other things, ignoring your physical body, the aches and pains you may have. Just always going back to your breath. And this is a foundation of a good meditation practice. When you're able to watch your breath for 20, 30 minutes without any problems, you can then let go of that practice and go deeper. Because the sun sets into the earth, and we have to find the light inside of ourselves. But when the light shows itself in the earth, in the depths of the earth, it doesn't look pretty. In other words, when our mind is calm, things are lit up within ourselves. What usually lights up, well, it's not always pleasant. What lights up within ourselves are our inner demons sometimes. What lights up within ourselves can be our nightmares, uncomfortable memories, guilt, remorse, pain, suffering. But the only reason we saw it was because it was lit up within ourselves. And what is it lit up by? The same fire. And it is through the comprehension of what is lit up within yourself that you extract the light And you can destroy those old patterns of behavior, those old patterns of thinking and feeling that we've talked about in our previous lecture, how to work with that, how to eliminate the ego. So all of these things are combined together. Breath is very important. And particularly for beginners of meditation, working with the breath is a very powerful and very simple way to form a foundation. Because without a foundation, trying to meditate on something may be very difficult or impossible. But if you have a foundation of learning how to relax and concentrate, from that base camp of a relaxed, concentrated, open heart, you can then apply that concentration, that tranquility, into these other things. Now, if depending on how our meditation goes, things may come to us without our willing it. And those are the things that are lighting up inside of ourselves. And sometimes they may be very beautiful and wonderful. We still have to understand them. Sometimes they may seem very unpleasant, painful. We have to understand them. Other times things appear which are confusing or neutral, and we have to understand them. Nothing must be left incomprehensible, but this is going to take our entire life. People want to know how to become a master, and the mastery is the mastery of your whole mind, your whole heart, your whole consciousness. And this is the way we do it. We do it through the work of the Dawnam Day, the gift of God. And we should be thankful that we have such a gift within us.